The fluorescent hum of the Neurodyne Analytics office buzzed in the otherwise silent building. Palo Alto, glittering with a million tiny lights outside, felt a world away from the sterile white walls and the low thrum of the servers. Bradley Kenton, his tie loosened and his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, stalked through the deserted rows of desks. 11:32 p.m. He hadn't seen this hour in the office since the company's inception, and the irony wasn't lost on him. He was back, staring into the abyss of potential failure, just as he'd been years ago, only now the stakes were exponentially higher. $200 million. The Pentagon contract, hanging by a thread. He reached the restricted access area, his keycard beeping him through the reinforced door. The server room's constant, cool air washed over him, carrying the faint metallic scent of electronics. This was the heart of Neurodyne, the place where their cutting-edge neural network models were birthed and nurtured. And right now, it was the source of his impending ulcer. The damn model was bottlenecking, throwing erratic error rates, threatening to derail the entire project. He'd called Dev Patel, the project manager, just an hour ago, and the panic in Dev's voice had been enough to galvanize him into action. He scanned the room, expecting to find Dev huddled over a terminal, frantically trying to salvage the situation. But the room was empty, save for one figure hunched over the primary console, bathed in the ghostly glow of the monitor. A figure in a janitor's uniform? A wave of disbelief washed over him. "You're not supposed to be on that computer," he said, his voice sharp with fatigue and a prickle of something else fear. The figure startled, turning around slowly. It was Monica Traylor, the quiet janitor who usually emptied his trash bin with a shy nod. Her face, usually hidden beneath a mop of unruly brown hair, was illuminated by the screen's light, revealing wide, intelligent eyes that held a flicker of defiance. It was unsettling. "I know," she said, her voice low and hesitant, a stark contrast to the confident whirring of the servers around them. "But I saw the logs. The error rates were climbing. I thought I could help." Bradley felt a strange mixture of anger and bewilderment. Help? This woman, whose job description consisted of emptying trash cans and swabbing floors, thought she could help with a neural network model that had stumped his team of PhDs for weeks. The absurdity of it nearly choked him. He opened his mouth to unleash a tirade, but something held him back. A strange flicker of recognition, a sense of déjà vu. He'd been underestimated before, dismissed, written off. He clawed his way to the top, fueled by that very dismissal. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to look past the janitor's uniform to really see her. He saw the lines of concentration etched around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands hovering over the keyboard. He saw the faint, almost imperceptible glow of satisfaction in her gaze as she pointed to a line of code on the screen. "See? The backpropagation algorithm was getting stuck in a local minimum. I adjusted the learning rate and implemented a momentum term." Her explanation, while simplified, was technically sound, disturbingly sound. Bradley felt a cold dread creep up his spine. How? How could a janitor, someone who ostensibly swept floors and cleaned toilets, possess this level of knowledge? His carefully constructed world, where credentials and titles dictated competence, began to crumble around him. He felt a dizzying disorientation, the ground shifting beneath his feet. You understand this?" he stammered, the question echoing the disbelief in his own mind. Monica's gaze shifted, a shadow of uncertainty flitting across her features. He saw a glimpse of vulnerability, a flicker of the fear she'd been suppressing. "I use my lunch breaks to learn," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. The shame in her tone struck him like a physical blow. Shame for possessing knowledge, for having the audacity to try and solve a problem. His anger shifted, morphing into a strange, unfamiliar empathy. "Learn?" he repeated, the word hanging heavy in the air. Monica nodded, her gaze fixed on the screen as if seeking refuge in the lines of code. He watched her, his mind racing. The implications were staggering. He'd spent millions on recruiting, on building a team of supposedly the best minds in the field. And here, hidden in plain sight, was a talent that had been overlooked, dismissed, relegated to the shadows. He could feel his preconceived notions shattering, replaced by a grudging admiration. He'd always prided himself on his ability to spot talent, to see potential where others didn't. But he'd been blinded by his own biases, by the rigid structures he'd built around himself. He looked at the code again, the elegant solution unfolding before him. It was a masterpiece of efficiency and ingenuity. He felt a surge of hope, a lifeline in the face of impending disaster. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that she had saved the contract, saved the company. But he also knew this was just the beginning. This discovery would ripple through Neurodyne, challenging its foundations, exposing its flaws. And he, Bradley Kenton, the CEO who prided himself on his vision, had been completely oblivious to the genius mopping his floors. He ran a hand through his hair, a weary sigh escaping his lips. This was going to be a long night. The hum of the servers thrummed through the raised floor, a low, constant vibration that resonated in Bradley Kenton's chest. He stood in the doorway of a Neurodyne server room, bathed in the cool, pulsating glow of indicator lights. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the faint metallic tang of overheated electronics. His initial annoyance at being summoned to the office so late had curdled into a cold dread. The Pentagon contract hung in the balance, a $200 million behemoth teetering on the precipice of failure. And here he was, chasing a ghost. A janitor, no less. He'd seen the security footage himself, a lone figure, small and unassuming in their gray uniform, slipping into the server room after hours. It was absurd, preposterous. Yet, inexplicably, the neural network model, previously choked with inefficiencies, was now purring like a finely tuned engine. He watched as the figure, a woman he now recognized as Monica Traylor, moved with an uncanny grace between the towering server racks. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, a blur of motion against the illuminated screen. He could almost feel the concentration radiating from her, a palpable energy that crackled in the otherwise sterile air. Bradley's gut clenched. This wasn't the clumsy fumbling of an interloper. This was the fluid, practiced movement of an expert. Doubt, a cold, insidious serpent that had been coiling around his heart, began to loosen its grip. Could it be? Could this janitor actually possess the skills to untangle the Gordian knot his team of highly paid engineers had been wrestling with for weeks? He drew closer, his footsteps muffled by the raised floor, and peered over her shoulder. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, a complex tapestry of symbols and commands that swam before his eyes. He didn't understand the specifics, but he recognized the elegance, the ruthless efficiency of her work. She wasn't just fixing the problem. She was fundamentally restructuring the model, optimizing it in ways his team hadn't even considered. A wave of something akin to awe washed over him, chasing away the last vestiges of disbelief. Monica, seemingly oblivious to his presence, paused, her fingers hovering over the enter key. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face, a fleeting mix of apprehension. And was it pride? She pressed the key. The screen refreshed, and a cascade of data flowed down, culminating in a single, starkly green line. Optimization complete. Bradley cleared his throat, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the hushed room. Monica jumped, whirling around with a gasp, her eyes wide with alarm. For a heart-stopping moment, she stared at him, her face pale in the server room's luminescence. He saw a complex cocktail of emotions swirling within her: fear, guilt, and a deep, almost visceral vulnerability. "I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Her hand instinctively went to her uniform, as if attempting to straighten the already pristine fabric. Her internal monologue raged. "He knows. He saw everything. I'm going to lose my job. Worse, they might think I was trying to steal something." The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Bradley raised a hand, silencing her. "Ow?" he asked, his voice low and laced with a strange mixture of bewilderment and admiration. His mind raced. Who is this woman? What is she doing here disguised as a janitor? And more importantly, why? Monica hesitated, her gaze darting around the room as if seeking an escape route. I memorized the root password, she admitted, her voice barely audible. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Not very secure, she added, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. It was a self-deprecating attempt to diffuse the tension, a tiny crack in the wall she had built around herself. Bradley's eyebrows rose. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, gesturing to the screen filled with her elegant code. Monica's shoulders slumped slightly, the initial fear giving way to a weary resignation. Online, she mumbled Coursera, MIT, OpenCourseWare documentation. I read a lot during my lunch breaks. She looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on her palm. Stupid, 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 she berated herself internally. Why'd I have a show off? Now everything is ruined. Bradley stared at her, his mind reeling. This wasn't just someone who had dabbled in coding. This was a mind that understood the intricate workings of their neural network on a fundamental level. A mind that had been hidden, disguised beneath a mop and bucket. The injustice of it struck him with the force of a physical blow. He thought of all the hours his team had wasted chasing dead ends, while the solution had been right here, under his nose, masked by the mundane. He looked at her again, really looked at her. The tired lines around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she held herself, as if trying to occupy as little space as possible. He saw not a janitor, but a brilliant mind trapped in a cage of its own making. A mind that, given the chance, could soar. And suddenly, he knew what he had to do. The Pentagon contract, the looming deadline, all of it faded into the background. This was something far more significant. The muted hum of the air conditioning fought a losing battle against the tension thickening the air in Bradley Kenton's office. Sunlight, filtered through the blinds, sliced across the polished mahogany table, illuminating the faces of the assembled team. Each held a different shade of disbelief, confusion, and a nascent fear that something fundamental had shifted beneath their feet. Bradley himself felt the weight of the revelation pressing down on him, a strange mix of exhilaration and apprehension churning in his gut. He'd barely slept, the implications of the overnight miracle replaying in his mind like a broken record. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the sudden stillness. "I've called this meeting because something unexpected happened last night." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, watching their expressions. Clayton Sue, the lead systems architect, leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, a smug smirk playing on his lips. He thinks he knows, Bradley thought, thinks it's another one of his team's triumphs. Mara Bishop, the senior ML strategist, tapped a manicured nail against the table, her brow furrowed in concentration. Dev Patel, the project manager for the Pentagon contract, chewed nervously on his lip, his eyes darting between Bradley and the screen displaying the latest model performance metrics. "As you know," Bradley continued, his voice gaining strength, "we've been hitting a wall with the neural network's token processor. It's been the bottleneck preventing us from meeting the Pentagon's performance requirements for the contract." His gaze swept over them again. Last night, someone saw that bottleneck and rewrote the token processor. Another pause, heavier this time. Clayton's smirk widened, a predatory gleam in his eyes. He's about to claim credit, Bradley realized, a flicker of annoyance sparking within him. But before Clayton could speak, Bradley dropped the bombshell. It was Monica, a beat of silence. Then, a confused murmur rippled through the room. Mara's perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Monica who?" she asked, the question echoing the thoughts of everyone present. Dev stopped chewing his lip, his jaw slack. Clayton's smirk froze, then slowly melted into an expression of utter bewilderment. "Monica Traylor," Bradley clarified, his voice steady despite the internal tremor of anticipation. "Our overnight custodian." The silence returned, thicker, heavier, pregnant with unspoken questions. Clayton's face twisted into a mask of incredulity. He's trying to process it, Bradley thought, trying to reconcile the image of Monica, the quiet janitor, with the feat of coding genius that had saved their contract. He saw the gears turning in Mara's mind, the swift calculations of probabilities and possibilities. Dev just stared blankly at the performance metrics on the screen, his eyes unfocused, as if seeing them for the first time. "I don't understand," Clayton finally stammered, his voice laced with disbelief. His internal monologue, however, was a torrent of indignant outrage. Monica? The janitor? She couldn't code her way out of a paper bag. This has to be a joke. A damn bad joke. "Neither did I," Bradley admitted, his voice softening slightly. "When I saw the logs this morning, I thought it was a mistake. A glitch in the system. But then I checked the code. It was elegant, efficient, brilliant." He remembered the feeling of awe that had washed over him as he'd studied the lines of code, the sheer artistry of it. He looked at Mara, who was now studying the metrics with a focused intensity. "Mara, you've been working on this bottleneck for weeks. What do you think?" Mara's fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up the revised code. Lines of elegant script scrolled across the screen, a testament to an unseen brilliance. A wave of understanding, followed by a surge of admiration, washed over her. "This is extraordinary," she thought, a sense of professional respect blossoming within her. "The optimization is remarkable," she said aloud, her voice hushed with awe. "It's not just functional, it's beautiful. Whoever wrote this has a deep understanding of neural networks and a unique approach to problem solving." She glanced at Bradley, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Monica the janitor? Intriguing. Clayton's internal fury intensified. "They can't be serious," he raged inwardly. "This is preposterous. That cleaning lady outsmarted me? My entire team?" He forced a laugh, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are you telling us that our janitor, who probably barely knows how to turn on a computer, single-handedly solved the problem that has stumped our top engineers for weeks?" Bradley met his gaze, his expression unreadable. "The code speaks for itself, Clayton," he said calmly. "I had Dev verify the improvements. The model's performance has increased by nearly 30%. He turned to Dev, who finally seemed to have regained his composure. Dev nodded, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "The metrics are unprecedented. The Pentagon's requirements are not only met, they're exceeded. By a significant margin." His mind reeled from the implications. Monica the janitor? The silent figure he barely registered as he rushed through the corridors each day? She held the key all along. A wave of shame washed over him. How could we have been so blind? Bradley stood up, his voice gaining a new edge of authority. "I've already spoken with Monica," he announced, his gaze sweeping over the stunned faces around the table. "She'll be joining the team, effective immediately. Mara, I want you to work with her, help her integrate. Dev, update the Pentagon on our progress." "Clayton," he paused, his gaze locking with Clayton's, the unspoken challenge hanging heavy in the air. "I expect your full cooperation." Clayton's face flushed with anger, his fists clenching beneath the table. "Cooperation?" He fumed inwardly. "With that imposter? Over my dead body." A cold, hard seed of resentment took root, twisting in his gut, promising a bitter harvest. The sunlight, once a source of illumination, now felt like a spotlight, exposing the raw, ugly truth of his own inadequacy. He managed a tight-lipped nod, his eyes burning with a cold fire. The air in the room crackled with unspoken tensions, the future of Neurodyne Analytics hanging precariously in the balance. The faint scent of sandalwood, Bradley's preferred incense, clung to the air in his spacious office, a fragile shield against the tension that crackled like static electricity. Monica stood before the whiteboard, the marker a cool weight in her hand. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the complex equations she'd meticulously scrawled across the pristine surface. Her stomach churned with a nervous energy she hadn't felt since her high school coding competitions a lifetime ago. It was a different kind of pressure now. This wasn't about winning a plastic trophy. This was about a $200 million contract, a company's future, and impossibly her own. She could feel the weight of their gazes. Bradley, Clayton, Mara, Dev, each carrying a different shade of expectation. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry, and began to explain. The bottleneck wasn't in the data pre-processing, but within the neural network's hidden layers. The activation functions were saturating prematurely. Each word felt precarious, a tightrope walk between revelation and potential ridicule. She fought the urge to fidget, to apologize for her presence, for daring to occupy this space, this conversation. By introducing a dynamic scaling factor within the backpropagation algorithm, her voice gained a quiet strength, fueled by the deep understanding that blossomed in the solitary hours she'd spent hunched over her worn laptop during lunch breaks. Bradley leaned forward, his expression intent, a flicker of something akin to excitement in his eyes. Monica caught it and felt a sliver of her anxiety ease. He understood, or at least he was trying to. That in itself was a small victory. She continued, breaking down the complex process, using analogies, stripping away the jargon to reveal the core logic. Think of it like a network of roads, she explained, drawing a simplified diagram. The data is the traffic. Your current system has bottlenecks at key intersections. My solution creates alternative routes, optimizing the flow. As she spoke, she could feel the shift in the room. The initial skepticism, the veiled disbelief, began to melt away, replaced by a growing comprehension. Dev, the initially doubtful project manager, nodded slowly, his eyes tracing the lines on the board. Mara, her brow furrowed in concentration, occasionally interjected with a clarifying question. Monica answered each one patiently, drawing on the deep well of knowledge she'd cultivated in secret. Even Clayton, his arms crossed tight against his chest, a storm brewing in his narrowed eyes, remained silent, seemingly captivated by the unfolding explanation. So, Bradley finally spoke, his voice resonating with a newfound respect. You're saying the entire system architecture needs to be reconfigured based on your modifications? Monica met his gaze, her own unwavering. Not the entire system, just the core neural network. The rest can be adapted. There it was, the quiet confidence that came not from arrogance, but from the undeniable truth of her work. Algorithms don't care where you come from, just whether you're right. The words hung in the air, a simple statement that resonated with far more than just technical accuracy. It was a subtle challenge to the unspoken prejudices that had kept her relegated to the shadows, a whisper of rebellion against the system that valued credentials over competence. She saw a flicker of something in Bradley's eyes, a spark of recognition, perhaps even admiration. Mara broke the silence, her voice calm and measured. This is significant, Monica. Truly significant. She turned to Bradley. This could not only save the contract, but significantly improve the performance of our entire platform. Dev chimed in, a hint of awe in his voice. It's elegant, almost deceptively simple. How did you? He trailed off, as if still struggling to reconcile the janitor with the brilliance displayed on the whiteboard. Monica felt a flush of warmth creep up her neck, a mixture of pride and a strange, unsettling vulnerability. She had exposed a part of herself she'd kept hidden for so long, a part she had fiercely protected. Now it was out in the open, raw and exposed. Bradley turned to Clayton, his expression expectant. Clayton, your thoughts? Clayton shifted uneasily, his jaw tight. He looked from the whiteboard to Monica, his eyes narrowed, a storm brewing beneath the surface. He opened his mouth to speak, then hesitated, as if wrestling with conflicting emotions. Monica's breath caught in her throat. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this was the moment. The moment where acceptance or rejection hung in the balance, where her future would be decided not by lines of code, but by the whims of a man whose pride might have been bruised by her unexpected competence. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Monica could hear the frantic beat of her own heart, a trapped bird fluttering against its cage. She met Clayton's gaze, her own steady, refusing to flinch, refusing to apologize for the brilliance that burned within her. The hum of Friday anticipation, usually a vibrant current through Nurudine's open-plan office, felt strangely static. Monica could feel it, a subtle shift in the air, the way a flock of birds stills before a storm. The whispers, the sidelong glances, they clung to her like cobwebs. She'd spent the last 2 days working alongside Mara, tweaking and refining the neural network, the echo of Bradley's stunned gratitude, still a strange warmth in her chest. It had been a whirlwind, a dizzying ascent from the quiet anonymity of a night shift to the bright, exposed plateau of recognition. But the air up here was thin, the ground uncertain. She caught snippets of conversation. Janitor, unbelievable 200 million. Each fragment a pinprick of unease. Her reflection in the polished glass partition of a meeting room showed a woman she barely recognized. Gone was the comfortable invisibility of her uniform. In its place, the borrowed clothes from Mara felt like a costume, a disguise she hadn't yet mastered. Underscore, they're looking at you. Underscore, a voice whispered in her mind. Underscore, judging you. Underscore, she swallowed, the taste of stale coffee bitter on her tongue. Coffee. Mara's voice, warm and laced with amusement, broke through Monica's spiraling thoughts. Monica managed a small smile. Please. The warmth of the mug seeped into her cold hands, a small comfort in the growing chill. Mara leaned against her desk, her expression thoughtful. Don't let them get to you. It's always like this when someone new comes in and shakes things up. Monica nodded, but the reassurance felt hollow. It wasn't just the newness she knew. It was the underscore how underscore. From the shadows to the spotlight. Janitor to what? She didn't even have a title yet. The uncertainty gnawed at her. The humming servers in the corner, usually a comforting background drone, now seemed to throb with a nervous energy. She opened her laptop. The familiar glow of the IDE, a small beacon of normalcy in the swirling chaos of the office. But the screen remained stubbornly blank. She tried again, her fingers hovering over the keys, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Access denied. Panic flared, hot and sharp. Underscore, this can't be happening. Underscore, she checked the network connection, rebooted her machine, each click of the mouse echoing the frantic beat of her heart. Still nothing. Her breath hitched. This wasn't a glitch. Across the room, Clayton Sue sat at his desk, a smirk playing on his lips. He watched her, his eyes glinting with a malicious satisfaction she couldn't decipher. A cold dread settled in her stomach. Something wrong. Mara's voice, tinged with concern, pulled Monica's gaze away from Clayton. I can't access the network, she stammered, the words catching in her throat. Mara frowned, her brow furrowing. That's odd. Let me check. The minutes stretched, each one a tiny eternity. The whispers around them intensified, the stares sharper, more pointed. Monica felt exposed, vulnerable, like a specimen under a microscope. Mara's frown deepened. It seems your access has been revoked. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Revoked, as if she'd done something wrong. The injustice of it burned in her chest. Underscore, they think I don't deserve to be here. Underscore, I need to speak to Bradley, Monica said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Bradley Kenton's office, a glass-walled sanctuary overlooking the city, felt 1,000,000 miles away from the simmering resentment of the open-plan floor. He listened intently, his expression grave, as Monica explained the situation. The feeling of being scrutinized, the whispers, the locked-out system. She finished, her voice trembling slightly. Someone's doing this on purpose. Bradley's gaze sharpened. I'll get to the bottom of this, Monica. Yes, you. As Monica left his office, an email notification pinged on her phone. It was from Clayton Sue. Her hand trembled as she opened it. Underscore, we work our whole lives for these roles. Now anyone could just clean the floors and leapfrog us. Underscore, the words, stark and venomous, struck her like a physical blow. The casual cruelty, the blatant disregard for her skills, The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. A wave of nausea rolled over her. This wasn't about the network access, it was about something deeper, something darker. The unspoken hierarchy, the rigid walls of privilege and prejudice. Underscore they don't see me, underscore she thought, the realization a cold, hard stone in her chest. Underscore they see a janitor who dared to step out of line. Underscore she stood there in the sterile hallway of Neurodyne Analytics, the hum of the servers a distant, mocking lullaby. The email clutched in her hand, a tangible symbol of the battle lines being drawn. Fear warred with a burgeoning anger. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about proving them wrong. It was about breaking the walls, shattering the glass, ceiling they thought she could never reach. And in that moment, the quiet, unassuming janitor began to transform. The fear receded, replaced by a steely resolve. She would fight. For herself, for her skills, for the right to be seen. Sunlight, sharp and intrusive, sliced through the blinds of Bradley Kinnon's office, striping the polished mahogany desk in alternating bands of light and shadow. He sat stiffly, the leather of his chair creaking faintly beneath him, a stark contrast to the controlled chaos that reigned within him. Clayton Sue stood opposite, his usually meticulous appearance frayed, a tie loosened, his collar unbuttoned. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the air conditioning struggling against the late summer heat. Bradley's gaze, sharp as a hawk's, was fixed on Clayton, dissecting him, layer by layer. Confess, his silence screamed. Confess, and maybe, just maybe, I can find a way to salvage this. Clayton shifted, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, leaving it more disheveled than before. He could feel the weight of Bradley's stare, a palpable pressure that made his breath catch in his throat. He'd rehearsed this conversation countless times in his head, each iteration ending with a triumphant vindication. Yet, confronted with the reality of Bradley's unwavering gaze, his carefully constructed arguments crumbled into dust. Look, Bradley, I didn't mean for things to go this far. His voice was thin, reedy, a stark contrast to his usual booming confidence. Bradley's lips thinned, a flicker of something cold and hard flashing in his eyes. Didn't mean for things to go this far? He thought, the words bitter on his tongue. You deliberately sabotaged a project vital to this company's future, and you claim it wasn't intentional? He steepled his fingers, the movement precise, controlled. Explain yourself, Clayton, clearly and concisely. Clayton's gaze darted around the room, seeking an escape route, finding none. The opulent office, usually a symbol of his aspirations, suddenly felt like a cage. He swallowed hard, the metallic tang of fear coating his tongue. It's about Monica Traylor, he stammered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. He hadn't intended to bring her into this, not directly. But the words tumbled out, propelled by a force he couldn't control. The name hung in the air, a fragile thing, easily shattered. Bradley felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. Monica, the janitor who had single-handedly salvaged a $200 million contract. The woman whose quiet competence had exposed the gaping holes in their supposedly rigorous hiring process. He leaned forward, the movement almost imperceptible, but the shift in power palpable. What about Miss Traylor? She doesn't belong here, Clayton blurted out, the words raw, laced with a bitterness that surprised even himself. He knew it wasn't logical, this resentment that festered within him. He knew, intellectually, that she had saved them all. Yet, the knowledge couldn't quell the insidious whisper in his mind, the whisper that told him she was a usurper, a fraud. A janitor, his mind sneered. Taking my place. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Bradley's eyes narrowed, his gaze boring into Clayton's. Doesn't belong here? The words echoed in his mind, laced with the unspoken prejudice that had plagued the tech world for far too long. He thought of Monica's quiet confidence, the elegant lines of code she'd written, the sheer brilliance that shone through her work. He thought of the countless hours she'd undoubtedly spent honing her skills, unnoticed, unappreciated. A wave of shame washed over him, hot and stinging. She doesn't belong here, Bradley finally repeated, his voice low, dangerously calm. He rose from his chair, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over Clayton. He walked to the window, gazing out at the cityscape sprawling beneath them, a concrete jungle teeming with unseen talent, stifled by ingrained biases. He turned back, his expression unreadable. No, Clayton, I'm just finally listening to the right people. Clayton flinched. He'd expected anger, a furious outburst. This quiet condemnation was far more terrifying. He opened his mouth to speak, to justify, to explain, but the words caught in his throat. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Bradley returned to his desk, his movements deliberate, measured. He picked up a pen, the click echoing in the sudden stillness. Your resignation will be on my desk by the end of the day, Clayton. His voice was devoid of emotion, flat, final. The blood drained from Clayton's face, leaving him ashen. The fight went out of him, leaving only a hollow ache of regret. He'd gambled, and he'd lost. Everything. He nodded dumbly, unable to meet Bradley's gaze. He turned and walked out, the closing of the door a punctuation mark on the end of his career at Neurodyne. Bradley watched him go, the silence in the room now a different kind of heavy, filled with the weight of his decision. He felt a flicker of satisfaction, a sense of justice served. But beneath that, a deeper unease lingered. Clayton's actions were a symptom, not the disease itself. The disease was the ingrained prejudice, the systemic blindness that had allowed Monica's talent to go unnoticed for so long. He had a lot of work to do. He had a company culture to change. He picked up the phone, his fingers dialing Mara Bishop's extension. He had a meeting to schedule, a future to build. A future where talent, not pedigree, would determine success. A future where a janitor could become a star. The sterile hum of the Neurodyne servers thrummed beneath the floor, a constant, almost subliminal vibration that Monica felt more than heard. It was a stark contrast to the clatter of keyboards, the hushed murmurs of conversation, and the occasional, jarring ring of a telephone, the symphony of a tech company in perpetual motion. A week had passed since her clandestine intervention had saved the Pentagon contract, a week since her life had taken this sharp, unexpected turn. She no longer wore the custodian's uniform. Instead, she sat amongst the very engineers she used to observe from the periphery, clad in the standard-issue Neurodyne business casual clothes that felt both alien and strangely empowering. Mara Bishop, the senior ML strategist, had become an unexpected ally, guiding her through the labyrinthine politics of the company. She'd explained the intricacies of the neural network, the nuances of the DoD requirements, and the unspoken hierarchy within the team. Monica listened intently, absorbing everything like a sponge, her mind constantly analyzing, processing, and extrapolating. There was a quiet satisfaction in finally being able to contribute openly, to discuss the algorithms and the code without the constraints of secrecy. Yet, a nagging unease lingered. It wasn't imposter syndrome, not exactly. It was more a sense of displacement, a feeling of observing this new world from behind a thin, invisible veil. This isn't my life, a voice whispered in the back of her mind. It's a borrowed costume, a temporary role. Not everyone welcomed her with open arms. Clayton Sue, the lead systems architect, radiated a palpable resentment. His tight-lipped smiles, the curt nods, the way he deliberately excluded her from technical discussions, it was a silent war waged in the sterile, air-conditioned space of the open-plan office. Monica could feel the weight of his gaze on her, heavy with disapproval, every time she approached the whiteboard to contribute to a brainstorming session. He thinks I stole his thunder, she realized, the thought leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. He thinks I don't deserve to be here. She knew it wasn't just about the contract. It was about the years he'd spent climbing the corporate ladder, the degrees he'd earned, the sacrifices he'd made, all rendered seemingly insignificant by her sudden, unorthodox ascent. It was a resentment born of insecurity, a fear that her unconventional path had exposed the flaws in the system, the biases that favored pedigree over raw talent. The phone rang, jarring her from her thoughts. It was Dev Patel, the project manager, his voice tight with urgency. "Monica, can you come to the conference room? We're having a video call with the DoD, and they specifically requested your presence." Her heart skipped a beat. Specifically requested? The thought sent a ripple of anxiety through her. What do they possibly want? Had they discovered her secret? Her late-night coding sessions disguised as cleaning shifts? The conference room was a stark, windowless box, the air thick with anticipation. Bradley Kenton, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of professional composure, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of nervousness. As the video call connected, a stern-faced man in military uniform appeared on the screen. He introduced himself as General Matthews, his voice crisp and authoritative. "Ms. Traylor," he began, his gaze piercing through the screen, "we've been analyzing the modifications made to the neural network. The efficiency gains are remarkable. Frankly, they're beyond anything we anticipated." Monica felt a wave of heat rise to her cheeks. She forced a smile, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you, General. I just saw a way to optimize the code." The General's lips curled into a faint smile. "We believe your insight could be crucial to future contracts. If you're interested in consulting independently, we're prepared to offer terms immediately." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Monica's mind raced. A direct offer from the Department of Defense? It was an opportunity beyond anything she could have imagined. But it also meant stepping away from Neurodyne, from the fragile sense of belonging she had just begun to cultivate. She glanced at Bradley Kenton, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. He knew. He must have known about the offer. Was this a test? A way to gauge her loyalty? Later that evening, as Monica sat in her small apartment, the glow of her laptop illuminating her face, she reread the email from the DoD. The words seemed to shimmer on the screen, a promise of a different future, a future where her skills were not only recognized but actively sought after. She thought of Clayton Sue, his simmering resentment, and the unspoken pressure to conform to the corporate mold. She thought of Mara Bishop, her quiet support, and the nascent sense of camaraderie she had found within the team. The choice felt like a chasm opening up before her. Two distinct paths diverging into the unknown. One path led to the familiar, albeit uncomfortable, terrain of Neurodyne, with its internal politics and unspoken hierarchies. The other path, shrouded in uncertainty, beckoned her towards a world of independent consulting, of direct engagement with the Department of Defense, of a level of responsibility she had never dared to dream of. The hum of her laptop fan seemed to echo the constant thrum of the Neurodyne servers, a reminder of the world she was about to leave behind. The decision, she knew, would reshape not only her career but the very fabric of her life. The muted hum of the air conditioning was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside Monica. Bradley Kenton's office, a panorama of the city skyline, usually filled her with a sense of awe, the skyscrapers like silent sentinels against the sprawling concrete jungle. Today, the view was a blur, her focus narrowed to the man behind the imposing mahogany desk. He held a sheet of paper, the Pentagon's official offer, its weight seemingly pressing down on the polished surface, a tangible symbol of her unexpected crossroads. The crisp white paper reflected the overhead lights, creating an almost blinding glare, a stark metaphor for the unexpected brightness her future now held. $200,000 a year, starting salary, Bradley said, his voice a low rumble, plus benefits and a signing bonus that would make your eyes water. He leaned back in his leather chair, the faint creak of it echoing the uncertainty churning within her. He watched her, his expression unreadable, a seasoned poker player waiting for his opponent to reveal their hand. Monica swallowed, the lump in her throat refusing to budge. 200,000, a number that danced in her mind, a dizzying waltz with possibilities she hadn't dared to dream. It was more than enough to finally move her mother out of that cramped apartment, to ensure her little brother had access to the best education. It was a life raft in the turbulent sea of her anxieties, a promise of stability she had craved since her father's passing. But the thought of leaving Nuruddin, of abandoning the project she'd poured her soul into, left a bitter taste in her mouth. "It's a remarkable opportunity, Monica," Bradley continued, breaking the silence that had stretched between them, thick and heavy with unspoken considerations. "The Pentagon, well, they don't come calling every day." She ran a hand through her short, choppy hair, the familiar gesture of small comfort in the overwhelming moment. "I know," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Her gaze drifted to the skyline again, the towering buildings now seeming less like sentinels and more like bars of a gilded cage. The Pentagon, she realized, wasn't just an opportunity. It was a different kind of cage, one built of prestige and expectations, a cage that would demand every ounce of her being, leaving no room for the quiet, unnoticed existence she had grown accustomed to. "You are in that spotlight, Monica. I'm not going to block you." Bradley's words were sincere, tinged with a hint of paternal pride, a stark contrast to the veiled animosity she'd encountered from some of her colleagues. His words, meant to liberate, felt like another layer of pressure. The spotlight. It was a terrifying thought. All eyes on her, scrutinizing her every move, dissecting her every line of code. The weight of expectation, the fear of failure. It was a crushing burden. The janitor, the ghost in the machine, was suddenly expected to perform miracles on a grand stage. I need time to think." The words tumbled out, ragged and uneven, betraying the turmoil within her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the office. Bradley nodded, his eyes reflecting a flicker of understanding. "Take all the time you need." Monica stood up, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. The office, which had always felt like a sanctuary of sorts, now felt stifling. The air was thick with unspoken words, pregnant with possibilities. As she made her way to the door, her mind raced. The Pentagon offer, a golden ticket to a different life, a life of comfort and recognition, battled against the quiet satisfaction she found in her work at Nuruddin. The image of Clayton Sue's sneering face flashed through her mind, the bitterness in his eyes a constant reminder of the resentment her sudden rise had stirred. She thought of Mara Bishop, her quiet support a beacon in the storm of office politics. She stopped at the door, her hand on the cool metal of the handle. A sudden clarity pierced through the fog of her indecision. The Pentagon offered escape, a chance to leave the whispers and the judgments behind. But Nuruddin offered something more profound, a chance to prove, not just to them, but to herself, that she belonged, that her talent, her passion, wasn't defined by a title or a degree, but by the sheer force of her will, her unwavering dedication to the craft that consumed her. She turned back to Bradley, her voice firm, the tremor gone. "I'm not going. Not yet. Let me finish what I started here." Bradley's eyebrows rose in surprise, then a slow smile spread across his face. "I thought you might say that." He paused, his gaze intense. "But Monica, things are going to change. You've proven yourself. You deserve more than a mop and a bucket." His words, though meant to be reassuring, ignited a fresh wave of anxiety. Change. The word echoed in her mind, a promise and a threat. The familiar routine of her late-night coding sessions, the anonymity of her janitor's uniform, the quiet solitude she found in the empty office after everyone else had gone home, all that was about to be disrupted. She nodded slowly, the implications of her decision settling upon her like a heavy cloak. "I know, and I'm ready." The words felt strange on her tongue, a declaration of intent, a commitment to a future she couldn't fully comprehend. But beneath the uncertainty, a flicker of excitement ignited, a spark of anticipation for the challenges that lay ahead. The janitor, the ghost in the machine, was about to step into the light. The air in the Nuruddin boardroom hung thick with the scent of stale coffee and anticipatory sweat. Monica could feel the weight of 20 pairs of eyes on her, each glance a pinprick of pressure against her skin. The mahogany table, polished to a mirror sheen, reflected the fluorescent lights in a harsh, unforgiving glare. Her reflection stared back a small, almost insignificant figure amidst the imposing figures of the board members. A janitor, dressed in a borrowed blazer, presenting the solution to a $200 million problem. Her stomach churned, a cold knot of anxiety tightening with every breath. Just breathe, Monica. You know this. You built this. The mantra echoed in her mind, a fragile shield against the rising tide of panic. Bradley Kenton, CEO and the man who had gambled everything on her, offered a reassuring nod from his seat at the head of the table. His confidence, though carefully projected, didn't quite reach his eyes. Monica could see the flicker of uncertainty there, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Can she really pull this off? The weight of that question settled heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her future, about escaping the drudgery of mopping floors and emptying trash cans. This was about validating Bradley's belief in her, about proving that talent wasn't confined to corner offices and Ivy League diplomas. She clicked the remote, and the projector hummed to life, casting a cool blue glow on the white screen. Lines of code, intricate and elegant, began to unfurl, a testament to the countless hours she'd spent hunched over her laptop during lunch breaks. The hum of the cleaning equipment a constant backdrop to her intellectual explorations. This is it, she thought, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. This is your chance to speak, to show them who you are. The issue with the Nexus model, she began, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands, wasn't simply processing speed. It was the inherent bias embedded within the training data. She paused, allowing her words to sink in, watching the expressions of the board members shift from polite disinterest to cautious curiosity. Clayton Sue, seated near the back, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His gaze, sharp and accusatory, bore into her. He hadn't spoken to her since the night she'd rewritten his code, the silent treatment a tangible manifestation of his resentment. Monica could almost feel the heat of his disapproval radiating across the room, a palpable wave of animosity. He thinks I stole something from him, she thought, a flicker of anger igniting in her chest. But he never owned it in the first place. Not really, she continued, her voice gaining strength with each passing sentence. By diversifying the data sets and implementing a novel filtering algorithm, she explained, pointing to the relevant sections of the code projected on the screen, I was able to not only improve processing speed by 37%, but also eliminate the systemic bias that was skewing the results. Dev Patel, the project manager, leaned forward, his initial skepticism replaced by genuine interest. He peppered her with questions, technical and pointed, probing the intricacies of her solution. Monica answered each one with calm precision, her understanding of the system evident in the fluidity of her explanations. She felt a growing sense of confidence, a quiet thrill as she navigated the complex technical landscape with ease. Mara Bishop, the senior ML strategist, offered a supportive smile. Her presence, a beacon of quiet encouragement in the sea of scrutinizing faces, steadied Monica's nerves. She gets it, Monica thought, a wave of gratitude washing over her. She sees beyond the uniform. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Monica concluded her presentation. The silence in the boardroom stretched, taut and expectant. Bradley Kenton cleared his throat, breaking the spell. Impressive, Ms. Traylor, he said, his voice laced with a hint of triumph. Truly impressive. The board members murmured their assent, their initial skepticism replaced by grudging admiration. Clayton Sue, however, remained silent, his face a mask of barely concealed hostility. Monica met his gaze, her own expression unwavering. This wasn't about making the system faster, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. It was about making it better, cleaner, fairer. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. That starts with who you let touch the machine. The silence returned, this time heavier, charged with unspoken implications. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of her words settling upon them. Monica had done more than just save a contract. She had exposed the cracks in their system, the inherent biases that had allowed her talent to go unnoticed for so long. Bradley Kenton rose from his chair, a decisive glint in his eyes. "The contract is secure," he announced, his voice resonating with authority. "And Ms. Traylor," he continued, turning towards Monica, "will be heading the new AI ethics team. We have a lot to learn from her." A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. Clayton Sue's face contorted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, but Bradley silenced him with a raised hand. "This company," Bradley declared, his gaze sweeping across the room, "needs to evolve. We need to recognize talent wherever it exists, regardless of background or title. Ms. Traylor has shown us that." As the board members filed out of the room, Monica stood by the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the gathering dusk. The weight of the presentation had lifted, leaving behind a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had proven herself, not just to them, but to herself. The hum of the cleaning equipment, once a constant reminder of her place, now seemed distant, almost unreal. A new chapter was beginning, and for the first time in a long time, Monica felt a flicker of hope, a spark of anticipation for the future. The reflection in the glass was no longer a timid janitor, but a woman who knew her worth, a woman who had finally found her voice. The fluorescent hum of the Neurodyne Analytics office lights buzzed in the otherwise silent building. Outside, the San Francisco skyline glittered, a million tiny sparks against the velvet canvas of night. Inside, Monica Traylor sat perched on the edge of her desk, phone clutched tight in her hand, the cheap plastic warm against her palm. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rhythmic tap of her foot against the linoleum floor. Each second felt like an eternity, the anticipation a tightening knot in her stomach. It had been years, years of strained silences, unanswered calls, a chasm widening between them with each passing day. Could a single phone call really bridge the divide? The doubt gnawed at her, a persistent, insidious whisper against the fragile hope she clung to. Finally, the click of a connection, a faint rustle on the other end, and then her sister's voice, tentative and hesitant. "Hello." Just that one word, and a wave of emotion washed over Monica, a complex cocktail of relief, guilt, and yearning. She swallowed, the lump in her throat making it difficult to speak. "Alana? It's me, Monica." A pause, a beat of silence that felt charged with unspoken words, the weight of years left hanging in the air. "Monica." Alana's voice, sharp with surprise, edged with something else Monica couldn't quite decipher. Was it suspicion? Disbelief? The uncertainty pricked at her. "What? What is it? Is everything okay?" Monica closed her eyes, took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in her voice. "I just wanted to tell you something, and it's probably going to sound crazy." The fluorescent lights seemed to intensify, the hum growing louder in the silence, each flicker amplifying her anxiety. She could almost feel Alana's scrutiny through the phone, the unspoken questions hanging heavy between them. The years of estrangement, the unspoken resentments, formed an invisible barrier. Could she truly break through it? "Crazy? What are you talking about?" Alana's voice was laced with a familiar impatience, an echo of their shared past. It brought a pang of bittersweet nostalgia, a reminder of their once close bond. Monica hesitated, the words catching her throat. How could she explain the whirlwind of the past few days, the dizzying ascent from anonymous janitor to celebrated coder? How could she convey the surreal feeling of seeing her code, her secret passion, powering a multi-million-dollar defense contract? "Remember how I always messed around with computers? How Mom used to yell at me for staying up all night?" A faint smile touched her lips, a fleeting memory of their shared childhood, of huddled whispers and stolen moments of shared rebellion. "Of course I remember. What does that have to do with anything?" Alana's voice was still guarded, but a hint of curiosity had seeped into her tone. Monica took another deep breath, the knot in her stomach loosening slightly. Well, I kind of fixed a major problem at work. A really big problem. The words felt inadequate, failing to capture the magnitude of the situation, the sheer improbability of it all. She could almost hear Alana's skepticism, see the raised eyebrow, the disbelieving look in her eyes. Fix a problem? Monica, you're a janitor. The blunt statement hung in the air, a stark reminder of the perceived limitations Monica had carried with her for so long. The words stung, a familiar echo of the self-doubt that had plagued her for years. But this time, something was different. This time, a quiet confidence bloomed within her, a newfound sense of self-worth that refused to be diminished. Not anymore, Monica replied, her voice gaining strength. I'm a programmer now. I fixed their neural network. The one for the Pentagon contract. She paused, waiting for the words to sink in, bracing herself for the inevitable questions, the disbelief. Silence stretched across the phone line, a pregnant pause filled with unspoken questions. Then, a soft chuckle, a sound Monica hadn't heard from Alana in years. The Pentagon? Seriously? The disbelief was still there, but it was tinged with a hint of something else, something akin to awe. Seriously, Monica confirmed, a smile finally breaking through the tension. $200 million. Writing on my code. She could feel the shift in Alana's tone, the guarded skepticism slowly melting away, replaced by a cautious curiosity. It was a start. 200 million Mom would have lost her mind hearing this. Alana's voice was soft, tinged with a wistful sadness that resonated deep within Monica. The shared grief, a silent understanding that transcended their differences, brought a fresh wave of emotion. I know, Monica whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I wish she could be here. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't heavy with unspoken accusations or resentment. It was a shared silence, a moment of quiet reflection, a bridge built across the chasm of their estrangement. So, Alana began, her voice regaining its usual briskness. Tell me everything. From the beginning. And Monica did. She told her about the late nights spent learning to code, the clandestine hours in the server room, the thrill of solving complex problems, the fear of exposure. She confessed her insecurities, her self-doubt, the constant battle against the whispers telling her she wasn't good enough. As she spoke, the weight of the past seemed to lift, the burden of secrecy replaced by a sense of shared understanding. Alana listened patiently, her occasional questions and comments a reassuring presence. And when Monica finally finished, the silence that followed wasn't filled with judgment or disbelief, but with a quiet acceptance. I'm proud of you, Monica, Alana said softly, the words carrying a weight of sincerity that brought tears to Monica's eyes. You always were brilliant. You just needed to find your place. The simple affirmation, the long-awaited validation, was a balm to Monica's soul. It was the closure she had longed for, the reconciliation that mended the fractured pieces of their relationship. As she sat there, in the quiet hum of the empty office, the cityscape twinkling outside, Monica felt a profound sense of peace. The contract, the promotion, the accolades, they were all important, but they paled in comparison to the rediscovered connection with her sister. In that moment, she wasn't just a coder, a janitor, or a success story. She was simply Monica, a sister, a daughter, finally whole. The night stretched before her, no longer a canvas of uncertainty, but a promise of new beginnings. The hum of the servers, a constant, low thrum that vibrated through the floor and into her bones, had become a familiar lullaby. It was late. The office, a constellation of darkened cubicles stretching out before her, was almost deserted. Monica trailed her hand along a cool, metallic desk, the faint scent of stale coffee lingering in the air. Gone was the chaos of the past few weeks, the frantic energy that had pulsed through these very halls, threatening to consume them all. The Pentagon contract, a leviathan of deadlines and demands, was secure. Neurodyne Analytics had breathed a collective sigh of relief, a sigh that echoed even now in the quiet stillness. And at the center of it all, impossibly, improbably, was her. She remembered the suffocating fear that had gripped her when Bradley Kenton, the CEO himself, had summoned her to his office. The fear had morphed into disbelief as he laid out the problem, the near-catastrophic flaw in the neural network model, the one threatening to unravel months of work and millions of dollars. And then, a flicker of something else, a spark of recognition. She had seen that error before, during her late-night coding sessions, tucked away in the server room, a secret world built between her cleaning shifts. A world where she wasn't Monica Traylor, the janitor, but Monica Traylor, the architect of intricate code. The memory of the hesitant touch of her fingers on the keyboard, the rapid-fire cascade of keystrokes as she navigated the labyrinthine code, still sent a shiver down her spine. It was a gamble, a reckless act of defiance against the invisible walls that had confined her for so long. She had broken the rules, stepped outside the neatly defined box they had placed her in, and it had worked. The hum of the servers seemed to deepen, resonating with the quiet triumph that bloomed in her chest. It was a fragile thing, this newfound sense of self. For so long, she had existed in the periphery, a shadow in the corners of this gleaming world of innovation. Invisible, unseen, content to observe, to learn, to build her own world in the quiet solitude of the night. But something had shifted. The world had tilted on its axis. They saw her now, Bradley Kenton, with his sharp gaze and unwavering belief in her abilities. Mara Bishop, her quiet support a steady anchor in the turbulent waters of office politics. Even Dev Patel, initially skeptical, had become an unexpected ally, his pragmatic mind recognizing her talent, regardless of her title. But the shadows still lingered. Clayton Sue, his resentment, a palpable, bitter thing, hung heavy in the air. She could still feel the sting of his words, the venom in his eyes, the accusations of undeserved recognition, of stolen glory. He saw her rise as a threat, a disruption to the established order, a challenge to the very foundation of their meritocratic world. And in a way, he was right. She closed her eyes, inhaling the cool, sterile air. The silence of the office was a stark contrast to the cacophony of her thoughts. The fear, the doubt, the echoes of a lifetime spent minimizing herself, they were still there, whispering in the back of her mind. But now, there was something else, a stronger voice, a voice that resonated with the hum of the servers, the pulse of the code that flowed through her veins. It was the voice of her own creation, the voice of the countless hours spent honing her skills, building her knowledge, brick by digital brick. It was the voice that whispered, "You are worthy. You are capable. You are seen." She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the cityscape shimmering outside the window. The city lights, a million tiny sparks against the dark canvas of the night, seemed to echo the possibilities that stretched out before her. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more obstacles, more whispers of doubt. But now, she had something to hold on to, a truth that burned bright within her. She was no longer a shadow. She was a force. She smiled, a small, private smile that held the weight of her journey, the promise of her future. The hum of the servers, once a lullaby, now sounded like a battle cry. Remember Monica Traylor. Keep learning. Keep building. And when no one sees you, see yourself.